Joining us now to break down the media headlines is Tom Del Beccaro, the author of The Divided Era and an opinion writer for Fox News and the Epoch Times. So, Tom, when we talk about this idea that, for example, there's a polarized environment where Joe Biden faces undue scrutiny, whereas President Trump does not, does Brian Stelter have a point there, or is he missing the mark?
It is one of the funniest things that I've seen, and I don't know how long. The resistance to President Trump, especially in the media, is the greatest resistance to a president since Lincoln and the South seceded and all their newspapers went against him. They have been after him, including, quote, mentally. The difference here, of course, Alex, is the fact that over 50% in polling agree that Biden has some mental cognitive issue. This isn't even going out on a limb. There's no poll that says, except for among a few Harvard psychologists, that says Trump has actual mental acuity problems. So for Brian Stelter to do this was literally ridiculous. The media is divided, but it could not be more intense in its criticism of a president.
And I want to point out, too, that I think that this is damaging to journalism. I think that the American people turn on the TV channels. They know exactly what they're getting. They know what they're getting from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, One American News, whatever it may be. In fact, there was a recent Gallup poll that found that 86% of people think that there's a fair amount of political bias in news coverage. So when you tell the viewers then that there is no political bias and they're seeing it for themselves, I think that's detrimental for the industry as a whole. Do you think that this is playing in to the deterioration of trust?
Well, I certainly think that if you watch CNN and MSNBC, they are not a news service anymore. They are feeding their viewers what they want to hear. And that's confirmation bias. They're not out there breaking stories. You don't cover Russia for 2 years on innuendo and then, suddenly abandon that issue when it's proven false. So, look, the media is divided. I write about this in The Divided Era. We have, the left has its information networks, and then right of center has theirs. But in truth, the left of center is certainly more biased because you don't get opinions on both sides and you don't get hard reporting. It is bad for the industry, but it is so ridiculous for Brian Stelter to complain about attacking his candidate.
And I do want to talk about the concept of never Trump Republicans as well, because it's something that was existent back in 2016. But now, for example, you see them more on television because that's really the only place that they can get their say out there. I mean, their ideology represents maybe 5% of the American electorate, something like that, yet they are disproportionately mentioned or given media appearances on some of these big networks. So when it comes to the never Trumpers, do you think that they are speaking from a principled standpoint, or do you think that they're speaking from their self-preservation, as Steve Hilton on Fox News said?
Well, I tell you, I obviously know some of these people, and I obviously know a lot of the Republican establishment. Remember, Trump came in and said that he wanted to drain the swamp. Well, when you say, I want to drain the swamp, that's a target of people that exist there already, including Republicans. And we always need to remember that this is a business. You know, Steve Schmidt, who's part of this Lincoln Project and never Trumper. This is his business. It's how he makes money. And people like him were marked early on as consultants that the Trump administration wanted nothing to do with because, A, they don't have principles, and they're just trying to make money. Remember, Trump goes to Washington to say, I'm sick of politics as usual and government being a business that soaks people. And so for a lot of these never Trumpers, they weren't into the administration for long. Scaramucci, okay, Trump's kind of a bad breaker-upper, as you know, but he's out. And so they get a lot of noise because the left wants to hear that noise. But that's the combination of what Trump's facing. And as for what the future holds, well, look, the party is actually not getting smaller. You're going to have this dynamic in the years ahead where the left turns into the Labour Party of England, it shrinks, and then the field's open for a broader Republican Party.
And when it comes to Steve Schmidt, too, I mean, it wasn't too long ago where the New York Post, I think it was just 2 weeks ago, was saying that he was actually looking for a job within the Trump campaign before he was rejected that job and then turned into, of course, a never Trumper. And I think that when you talk about what happens next, too, I think if Biden, by the way, wins the presidency, these never-Trumpers are not going to have a part in the Democratic Party. Progressives don't want to hear what these individuals say. They just make good media appearances because there are a couple of Republicans who are willing to show a dissenting viewpoint of a president who shares about a 90% approval rating within the party. So they are a minority view within the Republican Party, and they don't really have much of a following other than the fact that right now they're playing into that resistance narrative, and Democrats are buying into that. They're pouring money into the Lincoln Project, which lines the pockets of those individuals, but also makes a couple, I guess, catchy digital ads, which appeases those individuals. I think you're right to say that. But Tom Del Beccaro, I appreciate you coming on tonight, breaking down the media headlines and where we stand with never-Trumpers. Thank you.